July 26, 1983. In Vero Beach, Florida, police respond to a 911 call and surround a local home. In the garage, they find a pool of blood and the victim of a brutal attack.
The state of emotions quickly changed. At that point in time, we knew we had something very serious. Shotguns started coming out of the trunk. Emotions started becoming charged.
Before long, detectives realize they are dealing with a prolonged crime spree, one involving a string of gruesome abductions, rapes, and murders.
I knew that it would be a matter of time before he got hungry and started his routine again.
It was a horrible case. Still stands as the worst case I've heard of.
Along with police, there are those who chronicle the investigation up close, on film, on paper, and on tape. They are the public's first witness. Through their eyes, they capture our darkest chapters of crime.
What's up, Panic Fam? I'm Hannah, and if it's 2 a.m., the lights are off and the popcorn has gone cold, you know, it's Panic TV time. Welcome. If you survived this, and this, congratulations, all right? Congratulations, but your luck runs out here.
Across the United States, as many as 2,000 people are reported missing every day. In most cases, the person in question soon turns up unharmed, much to the relief of their loved ones. But on rare occasions, foul play is involved, and sometimes abduction and murder. 1981, Vero Beach, Florida, a resort community on the Atlantic Ocean. Situated in a prime orange-growing region of the state, the town is known for its peaceful and laid-back atmosphere.
Well, the crime rate here was below normal. Probably most of our cases were drug cases and, you know, your regular Saturday night brawls. Very few murders.
Originally from Taiwan, the Ling family are newcomers to Vero Beach. 57-year-old �10 works as an inspector at a fruit packing factory.
Mr. Ling originally came alone to set up the family here in Vero Beach. So he was here for quite a while and was probably more acclimated to the American culture. And then later his wife and son and daughter came to Vero. They came from Taiwan to a different country, different culture. It was a big adjustment period for them.
February 19th, 1981, 2:45 p.m. �10 heads to work, where he is scheduled for an evening shift. After he leaves, his wife, Xiang Ling, awaits the return of her children from school. 3 p.m. 17-year-old 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐦𝐞 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐫𝐢𝐬 follows her normal routine, riding the school bus home.
The bus stop was about a half a mile from the residence, so she would be dropped off at the bus stop and then walk about a half a mile on a dirt road down to her house. There were not a lot of residents that lived in the area. It was a lonely walk to her house.
At some point, a vehicle approaches, and her routine day takes a fateful turn. 4 p.m. 12-year-old Su Tao Ling, who attends a different school than his sister, makes his way home. Although the front door has been left open, calls to both his mother and sister go unanswered.
His mother had just arrived from Taiwan, so he thought that she may have been out walking or in the groves nearby. After a while, with them not returning, then he'd become worried.
He spent several hours around there not knowing what to do. That night, when they still had, no one had returned, he finally went to a neighbor.
The neighbor tracks down 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐬𝐞 father at work. Detectives soon arrive and survey the scene. All signs suggest that the mother and daughter had no plans of their own to leave for an extended period of time.
I went to the house. Mrs. Ling's purse, all of her luggage, personal items were all still in the house. The daughter's book bag was right next to the front door. Right inside the door was a vacuum cleaner that was still plugged into the wall and right in the middle of the room, as if someone was vacuuming them in and they were just walked out of the house or taken out of the house.
We all helped search for them. We had no idea where they went. We had figured that there was something drastically wrong, that something happened to them.
With foul play a possibility, a forensic expert dusts for prints and captures the home on film. While there are no signs of a struggle inside, potential drag marks in the driveway could point to a forcible abduction. By the following morning, a missing persons report, along with photographs of Mrs. Ling and her daughter, are circulated to police across the state. But as the days turn into weeks, police find no new clues as to the mother and daughter's whereabouts.
To just totally go missing and not be found, that would be an uncommon situation here in our area.
July 15th, 1981. Not long after the mysterious disappearance of the Lings, a 35-year-old woman named Judy K. Daly packs up her car for the beach. Judy's two young daughters, as well as one of their friends, are also going on the day trip.
They wanted to go to one of the local beaches there in the city where all the kids hang out, and obviously, so she dropped them off there and told them that she would pick them back up at a certain time that afternoon. Then she went on down to another public beach away from the mainstream.
While Judy relaxes on the remote beach, a figure watches her from a distance before quietly approaching her parked car and popping the hood.
She was on the beach area, started watching her clock, thought it was about time to pick her daughter up, went up to her car and went to start her car, and the car wouldn't start.
That afternoon, Judy K. Daly is reported missing when she fails to pick up her children. When police locate her car, the engine has been disabled, a likely sign of foul play.
We felt very strongly that something was wrong. This wasn't somebody that had just left on their own accord.
In many ways, the scene bears the same hallmarks found at the Ling home a few months earlier.
All her beach equipment was there in the car, and similar to the way the Lings were taken from the scene, with all their personal items there inside the house. We have someone missing, and looked like they were just taken from a location.
Judy's car is photographed and dusted for prints, but police find no evidence left by a possible abductor.
We started investigating, and we started interviewing a lot of beachgoers.
I remember we spent an awful lot of time looking for her, walking some of the areas over there where the underbrush and trails and roads led either to the ocean or to the river, trying to find any sign of her.
News of another disappearance shocks Vero Beach. In the span of a few short months, 3 different people in Vero Beach now seem to have vanished into thin air.
A small community, very close-knit community. A lot of people were very uneasy.
Before long, police will get a fresh lead in the case, raising fears that the peaceful resort community is now the hunting grounds of a homegrown serial killer. July 1981. In Vero Beach, Florida, police are investigating 2 different missing persons cases. Xiang Huang Ling and her 17-year-old daughter mysteriously vanished from their home, while 35-year-old 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 disappeared while sunbathing at a nearby beach.
At that point now, the Ling case, that was about 6 months previous to 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴. We suspected foul play in that case, so we're also looking at a possible connection between the Ling case and the 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 case now.
While still searching for the 3 missing women, detectives uncover their first potential lead. It involves a bizarre incident that took place not far from the same beach where 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 went missing. Just 1 month earlier, an 18-year-old woman driving near the beach was pulled over by a local deputy from the sheriff's department. He informs her that a robbery was reported in the area and that she is a suspect. Although she insists she has committed no crime, the deputy explains that her vehicle is a perfect match for one spotted at the scene.
The deputy told her that he wanted her to go back to the area to try to be identified by witnesses.
Although sensing something is wrong, she agrees to cooperate and follows in her own car. At some point, the deputy unexpectedly turns and leaves the main road.
She became very concerned. She thought she was going back to be ID'd as possibly be involved in a crime, and all of a sudden they turn off on a dirt road and end up in a very isolated area.
The road ends near a river, and the deputy seems surprised to find people fishing in the normally abandoned spot.
He became panicked, and she became very, very uneasy when this happened. His whole demeanor had changed, and now he acted very scared and sweating and nervous and wanted her to get out of there. Gave her a driver's license back and told her that the witnesses that were supposed to identify her as part of the robbery were not there, that she could go ahead and return home.
Finding the deputy's behavior suspicious, the young woman, accompanied by her father, visits the local sheriff's office later that day.
They come in the office and took a statement. She was very, very shaken up and very rattled.
She is shown photos of officers who might have been in the area. She quickly singles out one in particular, a 27-year-old local named David Gore. A married man with 2 young sons, David Gore usually works maintenance in the orange groves around town, but he also volunteers as an auxiliary deputy with the sheriff's department. Although he wears a uniform, he is not allowed to pull people over without another officer present. In addition, there wasn't a robbery reported in the area the morning the woman was stopped.
When he was called in and interviewed, he didn't really have a good reason for stopping her. He didn't have a really good reason for not communicating with the 911 system that he had stopped anyone, and didn't have a good reason for taking her down an isolated road.
In light of the incident, Gore is stripped of his badge. But now, 1 month later, with 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 disappearing along the same stretch of road, his name comes up again. Adding to suspicions, police learn that he has frequently been spotted at the same beach 𝙀𝙀𝐿𝐴 was sunbathing on.
We questioned him, of course, denied, said he knew nothing about it. He said, yeah, I was at the beach. And he says, I go check the water all the time, see what the waves are, and, what it looks like.
Looking closer at Gore's personal history, police find one other incident that alarms them. 4 years earlier, a woman alleged that David Gore and a cousin of his took her into the orange groves and raped her. Although neither Gore or his cousin were convicted of the crime, it shows a potential violent streak in a man now seen as a possible suspect in the missing persons cases. Suspicions about Gore are about to grow deeper. July 21st, 1981. Just over a week has passed since the disappearance of Judy K. Daly, when a 23-year-old woman leaves a Vero Beach medical complex.
As she was walking up to her car, she seen what appeared to be some kind of a movement in the back seat of her vehicle.
When she saw this, she screamed.
It appeared that someone was in there.
It just so happened one of the sheriff's deputies was also coming out of the building about the same time and heard her scream.
She went with him over to her vehicle, pointed out her vehicle. He also observed that there was someone in the back seat of the car, told him to come out. He didn't come out. At that time, he pulled his weapon, drew his weapon, and ordered the person out of the car.
A few seconds later, the mystery man emerges. It is none other than David Allen Gore.
He had no shirt on. He had a drink in his hand, a mixed drink. It had alcohol in it.
In Gore's possession, police find a gun, as well as a pair of handcuffs.
He had things with him that would lead us to believe that he was going to abduct her.
As for why he was hiding in the woman's car, Gore explains he was secretly following his estranged wife and son, whom he claimed were also visiting the medical complex when he suddenly needed a place to hide.
My wife was supposed to be here with my son. I was just, here to keep an eye on her, but I didn't want her to see me, so she pulled in the parking lot, so I just got in this car and was hiding.
The weapon and handcuffs, however, convinced the officer at the scene otherwise.
He didn't put a lot of faith in what he had said. He went ahead and placed him in the back of the car, arrested him, took him in the office. They had contacted his ex-wife, and she said that she had no appointment at all to be at the doctor's clinic or to have the son there for any kind of a treatment.
Gore is convicted of armed trespassing and given a short prison sentence with a chance at parole after 1 year.
Ugh, I swear my neighbors think I'm probably getting murdered right now.
Although police still have no evidence tying him to the recent missing persons cases, he has now moved from person of interest to prime suspect.
Everybody now is convinced that David was involved in the disappearance of the other two.
If the police are right about him, he will soon be free to strike again. On the other hand, if they are wrong, a dangerous predator is still at large. November 1981. In Vero Beach, Florida, 3 women have vanished under mysterious circumstances. Although police have no evidence against him, a prime suspect is a former auxiliary deputy with the sheriff's department, 28-year-old David Allen Gore. With the news that he is temporarily behind bars for hiding in a woman's car, other residents come forward with similar unsettling stories.
When David Gore got arrested, we got some phone calls from a couple girls, and we went out to their businesses and we interviewed them together. And they would have come out from the beach and find their car disabled. And all of a sudden, David Gore would walk out or walk up to their vehicle and he would show them a badge. He says, well, I'm a deputy sheriff. He said, I'll be glad to take you to go get some help.
Although the women had turned down Gore's offer, police feel this is likely the same tactic used on missing Judy K. Daly. If they are right, they need to find hard evidence against Gore before he is released from prison. With the help of a search warrant, police obtain the vehicle he often uses while working in the orange groves. It is hauled to a regional crime lab, where it comes under close scrutiny by a forensic expert.
We're going to start with photographs. Photograph everything in every angle that we can, using whatever lighting we can to make sure that everything is illuminated. From there, you're going to go through and look for obvious items.
No blood traces or victims' fingerprints are found, but a potential clue turns up beneath the dash.
Well, there's a radio underneath the dashboard, like a two-way radio, and they found 2 hairs that was stuck in the little bracket that holds the radio.
Although DNA testing is not yet available, experts visually compare the hairs with samples taken from hairbrushes supplied by the missing women's families. Remarkably, the hairs found in David Gore's truck appear to match those belonging to missing Xiang Huang Ling and her 17-year-old daughter. But while confirming police suspicions, without a more complete sample, and indeed the bodies of the victims to compare them with, the evidence would likely hold little weight in a court of law. At the same time, detectives begin approaching Gore's family members, looking for any information related to the missing women. One of those people is Gore's charismatic cousin, Fred Waterfield. Although they have very different personalities, the 2 men are known by police to have shared a close bond since childhood.
His cousin was a year or 2 older, very popular in school, was very athletic, was on the football team.
He would just talk like he was astonished and everything that David had gotten caught in the back of a car. Astonished with what David had done and with the pattern that David had turned out.
From David Gore's estranged wife, however, police hear a more telling story. In light of his recent arrest, an incident that occurred right around the time of Judy K. Daly's disappearance now seems far more ominous.
She said that he'd come home that one day, walked in the house, and when he walked in, he had blood on his shirt. And she had questioned him about the origin of the blood and how it happened, and he said that he was out hunting, shot an animal, and there was, that's how he got blood on his shirt, and kind of fluffed it off.
In March of 1983, David Gore is released from prison, having served his short sentence for armed trespassing. With no bodies, nor any evidence of murder, police are powerless to keep him behind bars. In the days that follow, detectives put their prime suspect in the string of disappearances under constant watch.
Well, we kept a tight surveillance on the house right after his release. He was released to his parents. He was living with his parents.
But a lack of evidence soon forces them to keep their distance.
His mother, like I say, he lived with his parents, filed several complaints against me that I was harassing her son. Since I couldn't arrest him, then they did not want me near him. So I was asked to back off, and it was like a restraining order, you know, to keep me away from him.
David Gore soon has more freedom to move around undetected.
I knew that it would be a matter of time before he got hungry and started his routine again.
July 1983. For students in Vero Beach, summer vacation is well underway. Like many of her classmates, a young woman named Lynn Elliot is enjoying the warm weather and the time off from school.
A normal 17-year-old high school teenager, very well liked by her friends. Lynn Elliot lived on the beach with her family.
We were the only house down there, and we had our own little paradise down there. It was just a beautiful place to live. We had our own boat. Kids could swim when they wanted to. It was a beautiful family. It really was. She was my only daughter. At that time, I owned a TV repair shop. She used to work for me in the TV shop part-time. We'd go to the beach. That was one of our most favorite things, you know?
July 26th, a hot summer day unfolds as Lynn Elliot hooks up with her 14-year-old friend named Reagan. Hoping to spend the afternoon at a popular beach a short drive away, the two decide to hitchhike.
That was the first time they ever tried it. It was just a lark. It was something to do. If I'd have known about it, I would have stopped her, but you know, kids are trusting. They really are.
Before long, a vehicle pulls over to give them a ride. 3 p.m., back in Vero Beach, a 14-year-old boy rides his bike through a local neighborhood when he suddenly hears screams and a gunshot. Seconds later, he spotted a blindfolded woman trying to make her way towards the main road, a man in close pursuit.
Both of them were running down the driveway. He fired one shot. She fell by the side of the driveway. He saw him walk up, stand over and take his gun and shoot her again, and then try to drag her back to the house.
Detective Sergeant Phil Redstone is in his car when the report of the skirmish comes over his radio.
Right then, I just had a funny feeling of what the address was going to be.
According to the call, the shooting incident took place directly in front of David Gore's home.
I mean, my worst fears come to light that we're going to have another case.
July 26, 1983. In Vero Beach, Florida, police respond to a 911 call in a residential area. A shooting was witnessed near the home of David Gore, the prime suspect in the disappearance of 3 local women. Although police still have no evidence against him, they fear a dangerous man may be striking again.
Initially, myself and 2 uniformed patrol officers were the first ones to arrive shortly after we got the call. Went in down to the driveway, set up in front of the house, called some additional units to set up a perimeter around the house.
As police look for any sign of movement, another 911 call comes in. A second local resident has also seen a man chasing a woman, but this time a full 4 blocks east of the Gore home. A few officers pull away to follow the fresh lead, only to learn a few seconds later the true nature of the latest call.
We didn't get very far before the dispatch was able to determine that the additional call sending us east was actually coming from back where we had just come from.
He saw the police there. He was trying to divert the police away from his house so he could escape.
Although they have yet to see any signs of foul play, police are now convinced that David Gore is inside the home, possibly armed and dangerous.
We were riding along there with the windows down and trying to listen for anybody screaming, any gunshots.
We tried to make contact with Gore inside the house to try to get him to come out. Yeah, we tried calling back on the telephone. We used the loudspeaker from the patrol cars. And we tried knocking on the door. We couldn't get him to respond to us at all.
In the garage, police notice fresh skid marks behind Gore's parked car. Seconds later, a discovery that confirms everyone's worst fears.
I just got down looking at the tire marks, and in the tire marks was a little small pool of blood. As I sat there watching it, I saw a drop fall from the trunk. At that point in time, I yelled out to the other officers, what I'd seen. And at that point in time, we pried the trunk open, literally forced it open. Once the trunk was open, there was a young female inside.
The body inside the trunk belongs to 17-year-old Lynn Elliot, picked up off the highway only 2 hours earlier.
It was really an unnerving sight. I immediately checked to see if we could find a pulse, hoping that she was still alive. Didn't find a pulse. Knew that she was dead.
Her hands were bound behind her back, and she had a blindfold over her head. The state of emotions quickly changed. At that point in time, we knew we had something very serious. A shotgun started coming out of the trunk. Emotions started becoming charged.
With daylight fading, police finally decide to move in.
We forced our way into one of the doors, sent officers in to secure the rooms. Once the entire interior of the house was secured, we heard a noise coming from the ceiling. Yelled into the attic for whoever was in there to come out. After a couple times, David Gore said that he was coming out, and he'd come out at that point in time, and he was taken into custody.
Also in the attic, police find Lynn Elliott's 14-year-old friend Reagan, bound and in shock, but still alive. Forensics expert David 𝙀𝐫𝐢𝐬𝐞 moves into the Gore home to preserve the scene on film and help search for evidence.
The whole area outside, from all perspectives, was photographed. Went into the residence and photographed areas they had been involved in, the access to the attic, and areas that he had held the girls in that they knew about, and of course the vehicle and Lynn Elliott's body.
Inside, police soon find the murder weapon.
Underneath one of the cushions of the couch, we had found a handgun. From the condition of the handgun, it appeared that it had been recently fired.
Across town, Lynn's parents learn the tragic news about their only daughter.
And when the guy came to my house to tell me all about it, tell me that she was dead, and it was chaos. It was hell. Shocked, completely shocked. Just couldn't believe it. Is this really happening to me, you know? Couldn't believe it. To us, yeah. Yeah. And it was chaos from then on.
Lynn was raised, and she was raised with values, and she was always taught that not everybody is a good person. And she made a wrong decision, and it cost her her life.
Back at the station, a picture of the day's tragic events becomes clearer. 14-year-old Reagan explains how she and Lynn Elliott were picked up and taken to Gore's house at gunpoint. They were then sexually assaulted before Lynn's desperate attempt to escape down the driveway. For police, Reagan's account contains a shocking revelation. David Gore wasn't acting alone. David Gore also implicates an accomplice. The man in question, none other than his own cousin, Fred Waterfield, who Gore explains left the house shortly before police arrived.
That was the first time that we knew of his involvement in anything.
Officer Phil Williams brings Fred Waterfield into the station for questioning.
There was something in his demeanor that looked worried as we drove to the detective division.
Looking at a police lineup, Reagan identifies Gore and Waterfield as the two men who abducted and assaulted her and her friend. At the same time, the boy who witnessed Lynn's shooting singles out Gore as the man who pulled the trigger. Before long, police will learn the details of a crime spree far worse than they had imagined, involving victims beyond the missing women from Vero Beach. July 27, 1983. In Vero Beach, Florida, police have arrested David Allen Gore and his cousin Fred Waterfield in connection with the abduction, sexual assault, and murder of 17-year-old Lynn Elliot, as well as the abduction and sexual assault of her 14-year-old friend Reagan. News of the crime rattles the resort community.
That sent a shockwave through Vero Beach. Both had been raped. It's likely that the second one would have died if the police hadn't gotten there when they did.
Although both men initially deny involvement in the other cases involving missing local women, the defenses of David Gore, faced with hard evidence against him in the shooting of Lynn Elliot, eventually begin to weaken.
He knew we were seeking the death penalty in the Elliot case. And we suspected he was involved in 3, 4, 5, we didn't know how many other deaths. And his lawyer came and said, if he leads you to where the other bodies are and admits to the killing of those girls, will you not seek the death penalty on those cases? So naturally, we agreed to that because we already had one, was a strong death penalty case.
Sometimes you have to deal with the devil.
Through a series of confessions, David Gore reveals the brutal truth behind a number of unsolved disappearances, exposing his cousin Fred Waterfield as his long-standing partner in crime. He admits to stalking 17-year-old 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐦𝐞 𝐒𝐿 before finally abducting both her and her mother.
He had his police badge with him, and he convinced her that she was in trouble, and he wanted to take her to her house and explain the situation to her. And when he got there, he found that her mother was there, and so he ended up kidnapping both. And as he was leaving their house, he got on a phone and called his cousin, Fred Waterfield, and said, "I've got some for you."
If you could slap one character for their dumb decisions, who would it be? Huh? Go on. Vent in the comments. I can't wait to read.
According to Gore, the motive was sexual. The women were taken to a nearby orange grove, where both he and his cousin raped, then murdered them. Although Waterfield continues to protest his innocence, Gore alleges his cousin was actually the instigator behind the attacks, even paying him a cash bounty of sorts for each woman he managed to abduct.
He was supposedly the mastermind behind this, according to David, that he would prompt David to do these kidnappings and abductions.
As police suspected, Gore was also the one who disabled Judy K. Daly's vehicle and waited for her to return from the beach, at which point he offered her a ride.
So he was able to get her in the car, started heading up the road, and pulled a gun on her, handcuffed her, and took her out to an isolated area west of town in the Grove area.
Gore also confesses that shortly after his release from prison, he and Fred Waterfield took a road trip where they picked up, raped, and killed 2 teenage hitchhikers, subsequently identified as Barbara Byer and Angelica LaValle, reported missing from Orlando.
They would go out on hunting expeditions for girls. It was sort of like your mother always told you, don't hitchhike, and several of the people that they attacked were hitchhikers.
Looking for hard evidence to put alongside Gore's confession, police begin excavations in the orange groves around Vero Beach. In one spot, they dig up 2 55-gallon barrels containing the dismembered remains of the 2 Ling women. In a later search, police find the skull of Judy K. Daly.
He decapitated her, buried her head in the orange grove, and took her body and threw it in the canal so the alligators would get it.
On March 6, 1984, David Gore is the first to face trial on the initial charges of the murder of Lynn Elliot, as well as the kidnapping and assault of her friend Reagan.
Reagan, from all accounts, was very, very brave. She's the one who survived, and she was the star witness in the case against both of them.
Throughout the proceedings, Gore shows little remorse.
Just sit there. No expression on his face. Hardly any expression. It's just like nothing affected him, you know?
He had the steeliest eyes. You know, you see these horror movies, you look at people's eyes where they look red, clear, and you can look all the way, see all the way like to the back of their eyes, the back of the retina. That's the way he looked. He was the strangest looking guy I ever saw. He looked like he came right out of a horror movie.
After a short trial, David Gore is found guilty on all charges and sentenced to death by electric chair.
When the verdict was read, I'm sure that the families, felt a sense of relief.
I felt great about that because he deserved the death penalty.
As part of a plea agreement for helping locate the bodies, Gore also pleads guilty to the murders of Xiang Huang and Ying Hua Ling, Judy Daly, Barbara Byer, and Angelica LaValle, receiving a life sentence for each case. That same spring, Gore's cousin, Fred Waterfield, also goes to court, first facing murder charges in connection with the death of Lynn Elliot.
He was concerned with putting on a show for the jury. I'm an innocent man that couldn't possibly have done this.
He maintained it was all David, even in the Lynn Elliot case where he was identified. He said that he was never a part of any plan.
Although Waterfield escapes with only a manslaughter conviction for his role in the abduction of Lynn Elliot and Reagan, police use their strongest evidence connecting him to the other murder cases in a second trial. After denying taking the road trip entirely, an eyewitness account places Fred near Orlando, the day Barbara Byer and Angelica LaValle went missing. That, combined with his own cousin taking the stand against him, sways the jury. On top of his 15 years for manslaughter, he is convicted of 2 separate counts of first-degree murder and receives 2 life sentences. In prison, he would continue to protest his innocence, while Gore would keep calling him the mastermind behind the crimes. Regardless, there is little doubt that one of Florida's worst killing sprees was the work of 2 men whose twisted relationship went back years.
David was the bumpkin and didn't get along with people and was kind of off to himself, quiet, wanted to be like Freddie, followed Freddie around. They had developed over the years of growing up and working together, of working a good guy and a bad guy routine. Fred's role in the cases was to be the good guy. He would help with the lure and the talk. Then David always endeared his role as being the enforcer. And he was the bad guy, and he pulled the gun.
Without Lynn Elliott's attempt to escape, their terrifying attacks would likely have gone on.
Chances are they would have never, ever been caught, and had Lynn Elliott not run down that road, and tried to get away.
She did her part. She ended the whole thing anyway. A hell of a way to go, but she ended the whole thing. She was a beautiful young girl. And my only daughter. I'll just miss her the rest of my life. It never goes away.
You never get back what you've lost.
I love you, Lynn. And I miss you.
Today, Fred Waterfield remains behind bars, serving a double life sentence. Despite receiving the death penalty, however, a series of appeals have kept David Gore alive on death row for more than 2 decades. For many, justice in this case has not yet been served.
I think that the families feel the fact that he's still alive. To be able to sit up there and not be punished for your crimes, it doesn't give the family full closure.
Still stands as the worst case I've heard of in Florida, and one of the worst cases I'd ever heard of. All the horror stories that your parents tell you to try to keep you safe came true with just these 2 men.
Be honest. Did you watch the last scene through your fingers? Comment yes or no.